Welcome, everybody. A lot of you have joined us from different time zones. So good afternoon to some of you, very late evening for some of you. So thank you for staying up late for this webinar. I promise next time we'll have it at a more convenient time for the European audience in addition to United States audience. Welcome. I'm Gaurav Deshpande. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for HyperTrack. And welcome to the webinar, Scaling Your Workforce and Logistics Operations with AWS and HyperTrack. I have really exciting news to share with you today. We sent out a press release around it yesterday. HyperTrack has been added to the supply chain competency at AWS. And Manish Govil is here, who leads the supply chain competency, is here as a speaker. So I'm really excited to welcome him as the first speaker. Our second speaker would be then Ram Kakkad, our Vice President of Product at HyperTrack. He'll present an overview of why HyperTrack is used by about 300 customers worldwide, including over 100 customers in the United States. He'll also present 3 case studies. He'll present case study for Traba, an on-demand labor marketplace. He'll present case study for W Energy, which provides oil and gas workers. And lastly, he'll hand it off to the amazing Tarun Aleti, Chief Product and Technology Officer at PartRunner, one of our customers. So that's on tap for today. Without further ado, let me hand it off to Manish Govil of Amazon. Manish,
thanks, Gaurav. So folks, welcome to the webinar. We want to share some very exciting things with you today. If you look at the industry around, a dynamic and flexible labor market is essential for the vitality of many industries. Take, for example, supply chain and logistics. In supply chains, there's a constant tussle between demand and supply. In some sectors like retail, demand can be especially volatile around peak periods, such as Black Friday or the Christmas shopping season that's going on right now, or the back-to-school season that comes in summer and fall. And that creates a temporary spike in the labor needs. Even in the best of times, meeting these labor requirements at the right place, right time is very complex. And the past few years have been anything but normal for supply chains. We have seen waves of supply chain disruptions, from the COVID-19 pandemic and the chaos it caused, to geopolitical issues as the Ukraine war, rising trade tensions, increased inflation, all on top of the usual issues we have always had to deal with in supply chains, like the impact of weather or labor shortages and such. Being resilient in the face of these disruptions is a top priority of supply chain leaders. In all of this chaos that's going on, the one bright spot has been the role technology has played to help meet these challenges. Take, for example, during the pandemic, organizations had to change their business models overnight, from offering curbside pickup to delivery from restaurants and the likes. There was demand for different type of resources than the normal operations needed. Organizations had to rapidly create mobile solutions to help customers engage with them and for their workforce to deliver against these new business models. You can trace the root of these capabilities to the adoption of internet, cloud, and mobile technologies. They help disintermediate layers upon layers and create more direct connection between consumers and suppliers through online marketplaces. In the early days of this technology adoption, the professions that benefited the most were those for knowledge workers, like software engineers, designers, lawyers, etc. But what about the blue collar and offline workers, like security guards, hospital workers, and service technicians? Next slide. Well, the world changed back in 2010 with the advent of this little-known app where customers could just press a button and get a ride. With the widespread adoption of mobile devices, better internet connectivity, and precise location technology, you could connect consumers and service providers in real time. This profound shift created a new class of workers, the gig workers. They now had an online marketplace to enable their offline work and make money doing so through these gigs. Next, the market for temp workers is estimated to be roughly around 3.8 trillion or so. Out of this, only about 500 billion is transacted through digital platforms. So there's tremendous opportunity to bring digital capabilities to the remaining 3 trillion of the market or so. But equally important, there's a big opportunity that exists in the market to help make the process of acquiring, onboarding, and managing these gig workers more efficiently. This can improve their productivity and reduce the administrative overhead costs significantly. Next. Now, to create the experiences that end users expect and deliver the data and reliability that enterprises demand, technology teams must introduce automation to plan, assign, track, and validate work. The next generation of location technology is needed to address the explosion of use cases that coordinates workflows for on-demand jobs. There are some very interesting case studies in this area where HyperTrack and AWS have helped customers achieve some fantastic results. Ram, could you please share some of these?
Sure, happy to walk through that. Thanks, Manish, for setting up the context really well. And, HyperTrack, we're excited to receive the AWS supply chain competency today. Thank you to AWS. You've been great partners, and Manish for kicking off this talk today, right? So I think to start with, just to lay out what we're going to talk through in the next section, like Manish mentioned, a dynamic workforce, which is being upended by the new gig work transformation across industries, is the future. And what that means is, from a workflow automation standpoint, you need to be able to scale to consumer grade. You need to be reliable so that jobs get done and they're tracked and validated correctly. And you need to be flexible because of all the dynamism that exists in the workplace today. And as Gaurav set out the context, we'll talk through a couple of customer journeys today with HyperTrack. There's Traba, which works in the staffing for light industrial companies. There's W Energy, which works in the oil and gas staffing and staff management workspace. And then there's PartRunner, and I'll let Tarun do the honors of talking through what PartRunner does. So next slide, please. Yep. So as Manish mentioned, gig work is impacting all industries globally. And taking that thought forward, I'll talk through how HyperTrack helps gig work marketplaces automate workflows for hourly and shift work. To introduce ourselves, we at HyperTrack provide you the building blocks to automate your on-demand jobs and workforce. What this means is if you're a business that has hourly or shift work or field services or works in the supply chain, let's say, then it's highly, highly likely that your industry is being impacted by gig work. And two big transitions kind of underpin this movement. One is the workers are becoming on demand. So if I'm a worker and I'm a gig worker, then I define my hours. I'll work whichever days of the week for whichever hours of the week, depending on my schedule. And the work planning itself is also becoming as close to on demand as possible. So gone are the days when you have a scheduled roster of work that's planned well in advance and everything's set and everybody knows what they're doing. It's really dynamic now. Work comes in on demand and workers come in on demand, and you're constantly playing a game of matchmaker and tracker to make sure that the work is happening as expected. So the challenge, though, for most businesses is that they exist in the legacy framework, right? All of us have been working on scheduled jobs for the longest time. And so how do you as a business make this transition from a scheduled and static world to a dynamic and on-demand one? And that's where HyperTrack comes in. So we work across industries, as we said, and we provide you the building blocks so you can move your business and model from the scheduled world to the automated on-demand one. On the left-hand side, I can walk through some of the building blocks that we provide. So it starts with the mobile SDK, which helps you track location for your worker. A lot of businesses have some legacy implementations of location where they capture some pings of location for their worker and sort of use that. This undermines the necessity to get a much better, cleaner, and well-managed location stream from your workforce. And that's where HyperTrack comes in. Our SDK essentially takes that pain off of your plate and orchestrates location tracking in conjunction with our cloud. Our SDK sits in your driver app, and whenever work is assigned to them or the worker states that are available, then the SDK will manage its location tracking. To orchestrate work in the cloud, we have APIs for order tracking or geofence creation and editing, etc. All of this helps you automate work that needs to be planned or tracked. And finally, on the consumption side, you have your ops control tower, and HyperTrack provides you views that can be consumed by embedding in your own product. So again, your ops team does not need to go anywhere else but where they're used to going. And similarly, on the consumer side, if you need to share views with your end consumers, then HyperTrack provides you out-of-the-box views that you can do that. So what this all means for you is that you can choose how fast you want to accelerate your transition based on what your business context is. We give you the full flexibility to make the transition possible. Going to the next slide. So let's jump into a case study for Traba, which is one of our close partners that works on on-demand staffing for the light industrial workspace. So they basically provide shift workers to run warehouses, distribution centers, production facilities, etc. And as you can see from the quote from Akshay, the co-founder and great partner, he's the CTO there. With HyperTrack, they're able to track 100% of the shifts and increase the time for which their shifts are accurately tracked. Now, accuracy is a big thing that is often missed when dealing with location tracking. We somehow mistake the fact that it's so easy for us to share location as consumers that when you try to build a business off of it, accuracy becomes very critical. And once you get into the tech of it, you'll understand how complex that is. Imagine Uber having to work with inaccurate location. The model will just break, right? So I'm sure Tarun will speak about that a bit later as well, but accuracy is really important, as you can see Akshay calling it out in the quote. And this automation is essentially helping them achieve a 98.3% fill rate, which is way higher than traditional staffing agencies that operate in the 50% range or so. So in their case, the need that started off was because they needed to provide visibility to their ops team for whether work was occurring as expected in the field. They needed to provide validation that every worker was spending the desired amount of time for their shift. And there was a single source of truth for post-work processes like payments and validation and all that stuff. So their software engineering director started looking for solutions and came across HyperTrack and added our SDK to their worker app. Through this, they were able to automate the detection of entry and exit to the work geofence, which helped them get to the amount of time spent on site. And this basically lets them get to automating whether workers are reaching on time. They can visualize the routes and the time spent by the worker during the shift. Again, all of this is controlled only for working hours and not outside of that, because we make it very easy for companies and businesses to stop tracking when there's no work context. Very critical for worker privacy issues, as well as managing the battery on the phone. And yeah, through us, they're able to essentially automate these signals and orchestrate work across multiple teams internally to make sure that their ops overhead for managing such jobs is minimized. Next slide, please. So let me walk through what a typical timeline of execution would look like for a typical hourly and shift managing company. So on the left-hand side, we have some of the key events that exist in the workflow. So let's say a worker is expected to arrive at a shift at 9 a.m. and let's say it lasts till 12. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that the worker is actually going to reach on time. So you can start tracking the location of the worker, let's say an hour in advance. And this is done through the mobile SDK orchestrating work with our cloud. And that gives you a continual stream of both the ETA to the destination, as well as any risks that you might encounter in that process. So for example, if the worker is, let's say, stopped on the location or moving in the wrong direction, we'll flag risks for you automatically. And that can help you reach out to the worker to see if there's any problem or if the plans have changed and if they're not able to make it. Now, some workers will go ahead and cancel and tell you, sorry, something's come up, emergency, I can't make it. In that case, you need to now look at your available pool of workers and see who's nearby so that they can actually be assigned the order as well. Now, HyperTrack makes it very easy for you to let your workers declare when they're available for work and do searches around locations to find the nearest ones. So that's how you'd be able to do a nearby search and find the most appropriate worker as a replacement, and then start tracking that worker for the same shift. And then the same process continues. Now, HyperTrack orchestrates creation of geofences for you around the work destination. It automatically webhooks to you whenever the worker enters the destination and exits it through the entire shift. So if sometimes we see cases where a worker just enters and exits very quickly, and that can be automatically caught, and then you can dive deeper into it in case there's any remediation required there. And after the work is done, when the shift is ended, we summarize the entire work for you, providing you key things like how much distance was traveled for the work. So in case you need to provide distance-based reimbursements or make sure that the payments are automated, you can make sure all the signals look like they're expected to, and automate that workflow without the need for operational intervention. All of this sits both via webhook, so you can build your own view if you need to, or you can embed our views in your dashboard. All right, next slide, please. So yeah, just summarizing what we kind of saw here, there are two main business things or KPIs that our customers try to sort of pursue when they automate workflows through us. One is increasing fill rate, key metric for any gig work marketplace, and ensuring that there is visibility throughout the entire shift, because the days of fire and forget in this world are over. When you're working with the temporary workforce, it takes time to build trust for workers. It takes time for workers to build trust with companies, and visibility for what's happening on the shift. So there's two-way trust is critical. All this helps you do is backfill, faster if there are cancellations, eliminate no surprises for no-shows, automate any dispute resolution. So for example, post the shift ending, if the worker says they were there for the entire time, the customer says the worker left early, how do you decide? Mediating such conversations is cumbersome and subject to whoever is part of the conversation. Data ultimately can help you get to resolution of such disputes as a single source of truth. And this also helps you reduce overstaffing because now you can accurately see who's not going to make it and only overstaff in those cases. Next slide, please. So moving on to the next customer I'd like to walk through. This is the W Energy company, which, as I said earlier on, does staffing for oil field services. So if you think about the oil field customers, they have gas wells that need to be inspected and need to be serviced at a cadence, and if that doesn't happen, then the customer needs to know. And they wanted to do this in a hands-off way because these inspections can often be really fast, and having the worker do any kind of manual intervention can reduce productivity and reduce the ability to actually track what's happening, which then leads to other issues and workflows. So what they've done is essentially created geofences around all of their places of interest. And the worker simply has to declare when they've started work, and HyperTrack automatically detects entry and exit to each of these locations, which they can then summarize and make sure that every plant that they expect to be serviced in a particular amount of time frame is being done that way. So in this case, the buyer was the director of the product management who needed to solve this problem for their operations team. They communicate the work that needs to be done to their workers through their own proprietary system. And the routes are decided ad hoc. So they don't actually know exactly when the worker is going to do the work, but they're still able to automate the tracking of the work because they let the worker decide when work is happening, and they've already identified the places of interest that the worker needs to go to. So this provides them real-time visibility for where their field force is. They're also working on interesting cases like, because some of these, locations are in the back of beyond, way out in the boonies, there's no way to know if a worker is having a problem. And so if a worker has stopped for an extended duration, that's a call to action for them to reach out and check in with the worker to see if there's been a problem. And then, yeah, automatically detecting, arrival to the field and exit from the field lets them know that every plant that they have of interest is being serviced in the right way. Next slide, please. Cool. So just to summarize, I think, HyperTrack is currently being used by about 300 customers across the US. And we're a close partner with AWS. We built our stack on top of theirs, and together are jointly delivering value to all of our customers. All of our core components are deployed on the AWS cloud. And essentially, we look to partner with companies that are trying to automate some of the most complex field-based solutions that require location intelligence. And we do this in a way that lets you maintain your existing product experience. So if you're somebody who works in this industry and is looking to get ready for the next wave of dynamic workforce, then we'd love to talk to you. And with that, I'll hand it over to Tarun, a great customer we've been working with for a while. Tarun, over to you. You're on mute, Tarun. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so Manish, really thanks for the great introduction that you gave regarding the evolution of GigWorks, right? And Ram, for the deep dive of how HyperTrack has been developing solutions in this space. I would like to just break it down into two parts. I'll first go through what Partner is up to, right? And how HyperTrack has been helping us in doubling down on our values. So yeah, you can move on to the next slide. To begin with, what's the problem that Partner is trying to solve, right? The customers we work with in this space of big and bulky, they tend to have little to no tech and no specialization in moving big and bulky products. So they mainly have three main problems. One is the lack of fulfillment, right? So whenever there's a last minute need, there's an ad hoc on demand need, there is a seasonality and effects, they're not able to fulfill their delivery needs. They do not have a lot of visibility in terms of where the driver is, or in terms of the tracking and everything. And the last one, they don't have much support in terms of customer support, Then go to the next slide. So before I go deep dive into what Partner's solution is, I would like to take a couple of slides to explain what big and bulky is about, right? For us, big and bulky is basically anything that is non-uniform, right? It has big lengths, which kind of sometimes exceeds the length of the vehicle, right? These are heavy items, right? Which can't be lifted by a single person. You need either an equipment to be lifting it or things like that. And also larger vehicles, right? It could start from all the way till van to the bigger trucks. Couple of funny facts, the last mile big and bulky component consists of 20% of the last mile. And the pricing of big and bulky is kind of very different to small parcel, right? When you look at small parcel, there's always hey, I want to pay $10 per parcel and all, right? But in this space, it works very differently. You pay by the mile, you pay by the number of stops. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Then couple more things. When we think about the big and bulky aspect, there are three main ones. One is the product, like I said, the weight of the items, how heavy are they, or what is the total weight? They play a big factor. Are you moving palletized goods, right? Or non-standard packages. Non-standard packages would be pipes, AC units, condenser units, right? Any home appliances you can think of. The loading mechanism plays a big role, whether you need a helper to be sent or you need specialized equipment to be on that vehicle, and also the pickup and drop off instructions, right? Sometimes our drivers need to come up with specialized equipment to some of these pickup locations for safety considerations. Sometimes we do dock to dock, and sometimes we do curb. So there's a lot of specific needs that needs to be clear in terms of the pickup and drop off. You can go to the next slide. So yeah, so Partner is trying to build this logistics marketplace. At core of it is basically which kind of serves the big and bulky needs and provides the end-to-end experience for customer while solving those four fundamental problems which I mentioned. One is having that expertise of the big and bulky, which is taking care of all those special cases. Then providing the fulfillment, that is having the adaptability to meet the demand, variable demand, right? Someone could request a vehicle today and 3-4 vehicles tomorrow, right? We are able to meet that variable demand. Provide visibility. I think that is where HyperTrack really helps us, and I'll go deep dive more on where our drivers are, what are the route they have taken, visibility on those aspects, And finally, support. The customer service is very critical aspect of logistics. You can next slide. So, logistics marketplace, in short, we try to connect our customers who are like companies. We connect with the hundreds of independent truckers and small fleets. We make sure that our supply is of top quality. They have the big and bulky experience, prior experience, right? We also train them. We do all the background checks, and the most important part of it is whenever you need a helper to be sent, whenever that vehicle needs to be customized, or maybe some special installations need to be made on the vehicle before it can be used. So we be able to turn that quickly, faster and faster, to meet the customer needs. Can go to the next one. Just in terms of footprint, so today we do around 4,600 roads per month. That's equivalent to like 70,000 stops. We have around 1,000 active drivers. We are operational both in US and Mexico. In Mexico is a bigger market than US. In Mexico, we have around 700 active drivers, and we are in 6 markets. In US, we are primarily in Northeast, around 300 active drivers and 4 markets. In terms of customers, we work with a lot of national enterprise customers like the Walmart, Amazon. We work with Office Depots, right? All these customers work with third-party providers like Partner, or they work with smaller providers, and Partner is trying to build a marketplace for go-to solution for them. Yeah. So I'll go dive. Yeah. So this is the Partner team. So Joshua Rosen, he is the founder. So he couldn't join this call today. I am also a co-founder. I oversee the product and technology. And Dan is a general manager of US. Most of our team have prior experience in logistics, and they have been part of other logistics marketplaces. You can go to the next one. So I'll kind of deep dive more into what are the top challenges we faced, especially in the visibility aspect. I think that is where HyperTrack solutions have been very helpful. There are 4 main challenges. I feel like this will resonate with most of the audience in terms of logistics or who are in the logistics space, right? The first and the main one is knowing where your drivers are. For me, second one was how do you quickly find the nearest driver and assign the route to them? And then third one is, okay, he gets started, right? Then how do you get the visibility of it? Did he start? Did he not start? Which route did he take? Did he went off track? Or sometimes vehicles break down or take a break, things like that, right? Which the live ops really need a real-time update. And the last one is optimization of the routes. How do you build a best route that's out there for the driver, so that we are able to, because logistics is, the margins are so small, right? Everything you can eke out kind of makes a difference into the bottom line. You can go to the next one. So why finding driver location is such a difficult thing, right? For me, looking back, I feel like it may not have been so difficult in early 2010s, right? But since 2018, there has been a lot of regulation changes that have come in, which made it very difficult to track drivers using open source products that are out there, right? And these regulations have become more stringent year by year, and make it more complex to find a solution that works for every phone that is out there, right? And these are some of the timeline that I have here. I feel like it started in 2018 with European Union. I think it was when Snapchat started tracking everyone, right? So that created the furor, and European Union, in Europe, it started the crackdown, and it kind of spread in 2019, and 2020 is when Apple kind of doubled down on it, making it extremely difficult to easily track locations through mobile apps. Can go to the next one. So within Partner, as we were developing our MVPs during this phase, we faced a lot of challenges, right? We faced challenges in terms of, it's easy to track a driver's location if someone is using your app, right? If someone is on your app, it's easier. But when it comes to logistics, the drivers are gonna drive, right? So they are gonna use some alternate maps while they are in the route. There's a tendency to close the app or put the app in the background, there are all these behavioral aspects that come in that made it extremely challenging for us to know where the driver is in all the time, right? So we tend to know where the driver is when he reaches the pickup stop. We know when he reaches the drop-off stop. But as soon as in the route, the visibility kind of is very uncertain, right? And we have tried a lot of solutions for this, lot of open source, lot of iteration, right? And we found that it's extremely challenging to, because the solution could work today, but as soon as there is an app update, it may not work, right? And then you're dealing with like there's an Apple and there's an Android. So the solutions again are not compatible, which are out there. And I feel like looking back, we spent a lot of time. Time is cost, right? In trying to solve the same problem over and over again with different solutions that are out there. In 2022 is when we started working with HyperTrack on this particular use case. That's how we started our first integration with HyperTrack. And post this integration, we have seen a tremendous improvement in terms of accuracy of our drivers, right? So on the left side, you have some routes where we have the poor tracking. Again, when I mean poor tracking, it is really during the route. Like, when someone is at stops, it's easier. Like you always know, right? But when someone is on the way, you just don't know the ETAs, right? You don't know how far they are, or maybe they are stuck. Maybe they took an off route, right? Uh, so that visibility has improved tremendously for us by their integration with their SDK. And most importantly, we don't need to worry about any app update, nor about any new devices of Apple, right? That SDK that we integrate with HyperTrack kind of take care of those changes that happen within mobile settings. You can go to next slide. So then, if you remember the 4 ones, the first one was finding driver location. Then second was how do we find the nearby drivers, right? So here, the thing is, like, if you have few drivers, it's easier. Like, you can just do like a brute force way of, hey, have 10 drivers, let me go and find, right? But as the number of drivers increases, right? So the brute force way doesn't work anymore. Like, it is time consuming in terms of response. It is also cost, because you tend to do a lot of Google API calls to find the nearest drivers, right? And also it's kind of tough to maintain a very scalable architecture of this. Again, this is where we have been successfully able to integrate with HyperTrack, where now that all our drivers because we have our drivers on HyperTrack, we could just simply send them, hey, this is my location, right? Can you send me a list of nearby drivers? And we could kind of control how many drivers we need to know, right? And that really helped us in standardizing our response time, right? So it's not like sometimes it could take like a minute, because it was taking a lot of time, because as our driver supply was increasing, as the pool of drivers in the nearby area was increasing, it was tough to give a faster response. So that we are able to standardize, and also the Google cost, right? The number of API calls we were doing time and again to find these drivers, we could reduce drastically with HyperTrack integration. You can go to the next one. In terms of what is next, so we actually just last week we also implemented the ad hoc routes. Now this is an interesting use case. I think this happens mainly in logistics, where customers don't tend to give a lot of information, right? Because the need is mostly the vehicle and the driver, right? So we send the vehicle and the driver, and the driver is on his way, right? So with ad hoc routes integration, now we are able to better track the exact route the driver has taken. And in case of any anomalies, which kind of Ram mentioned earlier, like, if a driver is stuck, or if someone complains like, hey, driver left early, right? Or where is your driver? Like, all these cases, because we do not even have the manifest when we started the route. With ad hoc routes integration, we have the whole visibility. For me, it's like an Uber kind of an experience, but historical data. Uber doesn't give you that kind of data due to privacy, right? But in this case, you literally know where the driver, each and every turn and corner he took. And in case of any issues that come up, it helps live ops in resolving them faster. In terms of some other solutions that HyperTrack does provide is the on-time routes. This is when you especially know the route ahead. So we do plan to integrate to that. I think this will enable us to double down on our ETAs and also in the geofencing part. For me, overall, the way I would summarize is like, for me, HyperTrack has enabled partner especially to focus on the core aspects that add value to our customers and also building the differentiators. As a startup, it's important for us to double down on things that makes us differentiated to our competitor, right? And tracking where drivers are, these are all common solutions that needed to be there. Like, just because we are tracking our drivers, right, doesn't mean like we'll be able to be a differentiator, because everyone is trying to solve, like everyone uses one way or other. And I feel like with HyperTrack, we've been able to build a very solid integration that we no longer need to worry about these things as we grow. I think in short, I think like tracking drivers, finding nearby, ETAs and geofencing and trackers. I think these are the top four ways HyperTrack has enabled partner in providing the last mile logistics experience to our customers. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Tarun. And thank you everybody for staying with us. I'm going to open it up for questions in the last few minutes, and we'll start to get questions using the chat. Feel free to ask questions and ask us. There's couple teed up here. Let me start. Tarun, how long did it take for PartRunner to integrate HyperTrack technology? What was the timeline for the integration?
Yeah, to be honest, for me, that was one of the biggest surprise back in 2022. I remember the first call we had was with one of the developer, and he was like, "Oh, that is pretty straightforward. All you need to do is like like purely in terms of technology, like, just put this plugin, like JavaScript plugin, right?" And I'm like, "Are you sure? Like, I don't believe like it's that easy, right? And do you really believe this solution will be applicable to all devices, like, And I had so many of that, and he was always like, yeah, you just need to put that, and obviously there'll be upgrades, right? But yeah, in terms of integration, I don't think it's challenging. I think it's more of use cases, like, how do you plan to use, right? How do you plan to use the data that is coming out of it? I think once you have a clear idea of that, the potential ways in which you can explore these integrations is a lot. Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you, Tarun. Another question related to PartRunner. PartRunner, as you guys expanded the drivers, was having the accurate location factor in terms of helping the expansion. In other words, how did it impact business for the PartRunner organization?
Yeah, so like I said, I think if you look into the four challenges, the first one is definitely knowing drivers, right? If you do not know where your drivers, like thing is, if you know your drivers now and then, it's very tough to show that to customers. Like, you cannot send them trackers. You cannot say, hey, this is your real-time visibility, right? Because it kind of gives them a bad experience and it raises more questions, and it kind of creates this counter loop where now the team is spending a lot of time in telling customers like, hey, Mo, the driver is not here, it's somewhere else, right? So for us, like, I think it really improved the efficiency of the live operations and the trust overall, just the trust of the team, trust of the customers, looking at the data that is out there.
Excellent. Question for you, Ram. What's the typical when people are evaluating? I know we mentioned this earlier, but is there a free trial available for the product, and how does somebody go about evaluating the product?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a developer-friendly company. You can sign up for free, and there are free accounts with some usage limits. You can experience the entire product that.
Okay, and follow-on question, what's the typical timeline that it takes to integrate the mobile SDK? Is that the first step, or what are the steps, I guess,
Yeah.
of starting to engage?
Yeah, so I think first, like Tarun said, just charting out what you're trying to build, setting that vision up. Usually customers who come to us have a reasonable point of view on that. Of course, it requires some amount of solutioning to define it, but we love to engage with that in our engage in that with our customers. And then the technical process of it is very lightweight. The simplest solutions can take a day to get up and running. Most complex ones, couple of days with a couple of iterations, just to make sure we're not missing any nuances and edge cases. So they're very lightweight, and we like to support you with pair programming sessions as needed.
Yeah, and I never have a meeting these days without this question. What is the AI component of HyperTrack, and what are you doing with generative AI or Chat GPT? You want to take that one, Ram?
Yeah, I probably need AI to draft a response for it now, but because we've encountered the question so much. No, lots of interesting things. Look, fundamentally, the last mile efficiency is about understanding what's happening on the ground and then learning from it, right? So typically what we've seen, learning from the past experience, especially in the work we're doing, has been sparse across the industry, and HyperTrack is leading the charge there. So very typical example is, you want a shift worker to go to a particular location and spend time inside a place like a stadium or a warehouse. How do you know what the shape of that warehouse is? How do you know if the worker spent time in the right shape or not? And so we are basically, most customers would start with a default geofence of a point and a radius, and that makes sense, lets you get out of the blocks fast. But then you'll start generating a lot of false signals around, okay, he has entered and exited the geofence, or maybe never even entered the geofence because it was wrongly tagged. So by detecting where workers actually spend time and correcting the expectation around that, we're able to improve the accuracy of entry time detection and exit detection, and make the system a lot more efficient using actual ground truth based learning. So that's the exciting frontier for us, which we'd love to work with our customers on.
Yeah, we also have order score and other capabilities that are enabled by analytics and AI, where we rate an order as a part of the product.
Correct.
We also build a generative AI co-pilot for HyperTrack that we demonstrated at GigWork Summit. So I know that there are a lot of people online today that are from the on-demand work or GigWork area. Please go to gigworksummit.com and see the keynote there where Ram presented along with his colleagues a generative AI prototype. So we do have a co-pilot for HyperTrack in limited alpha mode, which will be releasing in production sometime next year. But that's some of the things we are doing with AI. We continue to add to the intelligence in the product, and that's where AI comes in. Last closing question for you, Manish. Amazon is working a lot with AI. Any closing thoughts on how logistics and AI will come together as we look ahead?
Absolutely. So we really believe in democratizing AI and Gen AI, right? So Amazon has been in the AI space for a number of years now, because there's a lot of automation that Amazon Web Services enables for the Amazon retail operations as a solution provider, right? So as you talked about, learning from history, whether it's in terms of distribution or forecasting, whether you are somebody who likes to get their hands and go very deep in AI and use the foundational platform, or you want basically to use the foundational models and tweak to that. So we have capabilities for all the different levels, basically starting from a data scientist to an end user to actually a builder or developer who wants to use very custom models, right? So we enable AI for usage in all of those areas.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. With that, I would like to thank Manish Govill from AWS. Thank you for joining us, Manish. I would love to thank Tarun Aleti. Tarun and Manish, thank you for being generous with your time, for supporting us, and for everybody who is listening to us. Some of you listening to us very late in the evening, European time, or listening to the recording afterwards. Please do go to hypertrack.com. There are two options for you there. One is to start with the free trial, and you can start playing with the product immediately if you're on the technical side. If you are on the business side, we'd love to take a 30-minute meeting where we can walk you through the product, through more case studies. Over 100 customers have already deployed us for managing hourly and shift work. and over 300 customers worldwide have deployed us for all of our use cases. So we have lots of customer stories to share with you. We'd love to hear from you on the business side as well as technology side. So see you online. Have a great, wonderful rest of the day, rest of the evening for people in Europe. And we'll see you back in about 3 weeks or so when we'll present a healthcare related case study related to gig work in healthcare. So think nurses, clinicians. We'll be diving deep on that part of our customer base in the next one. Till then, have a wonderful, happy holiday ahead. Thank you and goodbye.